Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Minding My Mental Health. This is season two. Go ahead and give a shout out for season two. Thank you so much. It's 2024. This is our first episode of the year, and I am so excited. You guys know what I want you to do. If you are watching us live, I want you to hashtag the word live and let me know where you're watching from. And if you are watching the replay, hashtag the word replay. And again, let me know where you're watching from. You will know if you're watching live because it will literally have the word live up at the top. If it doesn't, that means you're watching the replay. That's okay. The information is the same. It's still great information. Again, let me know where you're watching from. Take this time to share this video, share it to any groups you are a part of, share it to your wall, to your story, to your friends. Today's topic is going to be so informative. And so I want you guys to jump on in here, tag your friends, tag your family. We are talking about dealing with parenting from the perspective of parenting a child diagnosed with ADHD. I have an amazing guest. I'm going to introduce her in just a moment. But if you know of someone who is parenting a child with ADHD, go ahead and take that time to tag them because they don't want to miss this episode. Send it to them because I believe today is going to be something where they can learn a lot of great information, be empowered, which is why we are having Minding My Mental Health. You guys know what I say almost every episode here with Minding My Mental Health. Our goal is to tear down the stigma around mental health in our community and bring awareness to things that affect us so that we can be empowered and grow and be our best selves. So all of that said, thank you for joining. Let's get into this topic with our amazing guest, Dr. Angel Gates. Welcome, Dr. Gates. Thank you so very much. Take a moment to tell everybody about yourself, how you became a parenting coach, an ADHD parenting coach, all of that, your background, and what brought you to this point.
Awesome. First off, thank you so much for having me to be able to share on your platform about a topic that's, like you said, just we need to know more about, to be aware about, and something that's near and dear to me. I am Dr. Angel Gates. I am a mother of four young boys, three who have been diagnosed with ADHD. So we've been on a journey for almost 6 years now when my oldest children were diagnosed with ADHD. So really, as a parent, I wanted to do all that I could to help my children succeed. And even with the 20-year background in healthcare, I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know about ADHD. So I went on a quest of learning to figure out how to best help my children, which led me to, I always say, it was a thing that was frustrating for me, not being able to really connect and parent my children or get the results that I thought I should be getting. So I feel like I'm on a path of purpose, which is really learning about ADHD, not just for my children, but to be able to be in a position to teach other parents about parenting children with ADHD. So I've created Our Journey Through ADHD, which is a business really to just provide information, insight, coaching, support for parents who are dealing with what I'm dealing with, and also to help reduce the stigma of ADHD, specifically in the Black community. I know that we have to get past the stigma to be able to get to a place of awareness and education and to be able to help our children. So this is really what led me to this point in my life, really being able to help my children and realizing that there's just not enough information out about how to parent, that parenting, we do need help. Sometimes even in our parenting journey with any children, but specifically those who have specific challenges, we just need someone to just help coach us along the way. And how do we help them succeed, not just for now as their, children, but for my children and for the parents that I work with. I want to help us provide the avenues that our children can advocate for themselves and be successful adults.
So you mentioned your frustrations kind of led you to this place. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those frustrations were and some of the challenges you faced with four children and then three diagnosed with ADHD?
Absolutely. So the frustrations were, of course, trying to parent my children the way I was parented and
Mhm.
not getting those results that I had expectations for. And it was just a simple, of course, the busyness or the constant reminders about just doing what I
Mhm.
considered simple tasks and not getting those results or feeling like that I was having to continuously repeat myself. Um, but not understanding that what I expected didn't align with how their brain was working.
Mm.
So getting to a point of saying, okay, I realize that what I'm expecting, what I'm doing is not creating the change that I'm wanting. So I had to take a step back, learn a little more, learn a lot more, learn a lot more about ADHD and understand how my children's brains were working and being able to
Mhm.
parent them from that perspective to get the results that I need and for them to
That's
be
good.
able to grow and be successful and still enjoy life and not be so discouraged
Mhm.
or discouraged with not meeting my expectations.
Talk a little bit about when you weren't getting those results. Did you attribute that to I'm not a good mom or these kids are, they're extra? How did you
Mhm.
kind of attribute those results?
So it was more so, and not even, of course, feeling like that I wasn't doing a maybe not a good mom, and not even just for me internally, or hearing the talk or hearing the comments from
Mhm.
others about parenting or how my children were behaving or
Mhm.
just even the little remarks, being in public. Ooh, if that was my child, I'll do this. Getting a lot of that, or ooh, they ought to be able to sit down somewhere and things like that. When I wanted my children to be able to sit down and behave in a typical fashion that everyone, not just myself, but everyone expected in particular
Mhm.
situations and in particular settings. And even after the multiple sit down, sit down, sit down, but they would still get back up as if
Right.
I hadn't said anything, and wondering, of course, and almost the embarrassment of
Mhm.
having my children in public and they're not conforming to the norm, um, which led me to really try to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, why aren't my children like other children? So it led me to a point of just really trying to understand what ADHD is, how it beyond what society says
Mhm.
it is, and being able to understand, then implement to be able to help them fit into societal norms,
Mhm.
and even in school.
So I love the fact that you said it led you to a place of trying to understand rather than a place of I'm going to like I'm gonna
Mhm,
force my will to this place of
mhm.
frustration or anger. You said,
Yes.
no, let me just step back. And I think that's something a lot of people need to hear, that
Mhm,
it's okay to step back and say, let me figure out what's going on here, or let me try, let me go on some discovery, or either about
mhm.
myself. Because sometimes it's about us,
Absolutely,
like
absolutely.
what is it that triggers me so much when my child does that? Or sometimes it's a bit of both of those things. And so I love the fact that you were able to see that and say, yeah, this is frustrating,
Mhm,
but I need to step back and get more understanding. And that's what I want to encourage everybody. If you're hitting a wall, that doesn't mean you're failing. It literally means it may be time for a pause to step back and say,
mhm.
what other things can I learn? How can I grow from this? As opposed to just continuing to run into that wall. Tell us, you said you're an ADHD parenting coach. What is that? How does that help parents? And can you tell us more about how one becomes a parenting coach?
Okay, so absolutely. This was something new to me just in my course of trying to figure out what I needed to do. I realized that, like you said, it starts with me
Mhm.
being able to understand what was triggering me, what was frustrating me,
Right.
and being able to identify those things, because I can't expect change in my children if I'm not willing to change, if I'm not willing to make some adjustments in my thinking process, in my delivery, um, and in how I parent. I can't expect my children to be anything different. It starts with me. So, in me trying to learn and understand, it helped me to understand that parenting has its own challenges. Parenting a child with ADHD has its own challenges. And the parenting coach route for me was, okay, I need help specific for
Mm-hmm.
my children with ADHD. So it took me on a course of just doing some research, and I came across a parenting coach, and I began to learn that it starts with me, that I can't get frustrated in the things that's going on in my home, specifically the behaviors, because it's not an attack on me. Their
Mm-hmm.
behaviors is not an attack on me. Their behaviors is not a reflection of my parenting. People would say that, oh, children with ADHD, um, people would say, oh, parents are just bad parents. They're poor parenting, but there's
Mm-hmm.
no correlation there. But my parenting does determine their outcome. So I wanted to learn more. I researched, and I realized that there are things that I can do as a parent to help them succeed, not only at home, but in the classroom and in society. And that's my ultimate goal for my children. I want
Mm-hmm.
them to be successful young men, successful in their community, in any endeavor that they put their minds to. So it starts now. I can't wait till they're older.
Right.
And I have to help them along the way. And with ADHD, because this is a lifelong condition, I'm walking alongside them,
Mm-hmm.
to support them in their own learning, to support them in advocating for themselves. And I've learned all of that through getting coached
Okay.
from someone specific in ADHD parenting. And that's why I went on this quest to become an ADHD parent coach. If I have this desire, um, there are other parents who also have this desire to want their children to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just don't know where to start.
Right.
So the ADHD parenting coach is really just there to help you start, help you implement the strategies, provide the resources, provide the support and the coaching you need as a parent to help your children succeed until they get to a point, specifically until they're able to be coached individually.
Mm-hmm.
Because the child has to have a specific mindset to be coached.
Yeah.
Well, until that point, it's the responsibility of the parent to help guide them and coach them and provide the structure in the home and to work with the teachers to get them to that place.
So, how old were your children when they got the diagnosis?
So my three that are diagnosed are currently, I have 10-year-old twins and an 8-year-old. They all received their diagnosis when they were in kindergarten. So my twins were
Mm.
5 and my 8-year-old had just turned 6. So like I said, we've been on this journey since October of 2018 when my twins
Okay.
were in school. And the diagnosis came as a result of, even in kindergarten, my twins being suspended from school.
Mm.
And even when they were in pre-K, they were expelled from pre-K because of behaviors. So with me just trying to figure out, how do I help them in school? How do I help keep
Mm-hmm.
them in school? Because if they're not in school, they're not
Right.
learning. Um, it's when, because I'm in healthcare, I was like, I know I needed some extra guidance. So
Right.
I took my children to a psychologist, and that's when we received our diagnosis. Um, for my older kids. And since then, we've been on a track of being able to help them. And we've seen a
Mm-hmm.
complete turnaround in behaviors, especially in school. They are extremely intelligent, straight A students. But it took me being able to
Mm-hmm.
say, there is something going on. And being
Yeah.
able to listen to the input from the school,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a viewpoint that I didn't have.
Right.
Some of the behaviors I was seeing, or they were telling me, was just, one of my children were extremely impulsive, not in a malicious way to other children,
Mm-hmm.
but just couldn't keep his hands to himself,
Mm-hmm.
or not able to sit down and being extremely disruptive, um, which was impacting him learning.
Right.
So being able to cross that hurdle has really put us on a trajectory now that they are doing extremely well. But it took me
Yeah.
accepting that I needed for them to have an evaluation to see what was really going on. So that was my twins. So when my 8-year-old, now 8-year-old, was in kindergarten and we started to see those
Mm,
same behaviors, I was pretty much aware of what was going on
right.
because ADHD is genetic.
Mm-hmm.
So if one sibling has it, then it's a high probability that other siblings has it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew what to do with my then 6-year-old. And of course, he received his diagnosis in the kindergarten, and we've had some trials, but we're so much better now because I chose to start early.
Yeah. Tell me, with your twins specifically, that
Mhm,
first moment of hearing your twins are about to be expelled or suspended.
mhm.
I know, just from my perspective, I would be like, oh my gosh, right? How did you handle your own mental health during that time of kind of going back and forth, I'm sure, with the school?
Mhm. I was devastated, embarrassed, upset, because the suspension was probably the third strike. So I
Mm,
had been communicating with the schools
right.
and other incidents that had been happening in the classroom, receiving a lot of calls, even in kindergarten, receiving a lot of calls about their behaviors in school and how it was disruptive to
Hmm.
the entire class, and to the point to we tried other things in the classroom to up until this point to where that was like the next step for them to receive a suspension. So after that I was like, okay, this can't happen again.
Yeah.
What's going on? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? And let me go communicate what the school has told me to the psychologist.
Hmm.
And that's when we went down the path of them being evaluated for ADHD. So yes, I was definitely at a place of frustration there, not necessarily at my children, because at that
Hmm.
point I was beginning to understand that maybe some of the
Symptoms.
things
Hmm.
that they were experiencing was maybe a little beyond their control,
Hmm.
especially when they could recite the rules, but when it was time for them to
Right.
implement, there was a disconnect.
Did you see it impact their confidence at all? Like getting in trouble at school? How did that impact their, their confidence, their self-esteem? Because I know I worked with elementary students in public schools for a while, and I would often see they would internalize,
Mhm.
either thinking they are bad
Oh,
children
yes.
or thinking, I just can't, something's wrong with me, those types of things. Did you
Mhm.
see any of that?
I did, and that's one of the things that probably made me act go on and act when your 5-year-old child says to you, "What happened today? I was being bad." Or
Hmm.
I'm bad. No, you're not bad.
Right.
You did some things that you weren't supposed to do, but for them to um, describe themselves as being bad, or even perhaps adults or
Hmm.
others or other children making comments to them to where they were taking on the characteristics that someone else told them, or I'm bad. So I was like, no, you're not bad. You made some bad choices, or you didn't follow the directions, but you're not bad. And that's one of the things that a lot of children with ADHD
Hmm.
experience, not just as,
Yep.
not just as kindergartners, but throughout school, that they're lazy, that they're disobedient, that they're disrespectful, or they're defiant. These are some of the characteristics that adults who just don't understand are these are labels that adults are placing on these children, so their self-esteem takes a hit. And that's one of the things that I was trying to avoid or prevent for my children, that I wanted their self-esteem to remain intact. So if that means that I have to be proactive to figure out what's going on with them and to be able to help them
Hmm.
mitigate some of the behaviors, I was going to do that because I didn't want my children walking around saying they were bad.
Right. So speaking of that, getting feedback from the schools and all
Mhm,
of that, tell me how you advocated for your kids once they got their
mhm.
diagnosis, all of that. again, I've worked in the school system. I've worked specifically with children with all types of diagnoses. ADHD was a common one. Um, what was your role as far as parenting coach and just parent with advocating and
Mhm.
helping them to get the resources that they needed?
Yeah. So for me, I was very open and transparent with the school about their diagnosis, even about the decision to put them on medication. But my advocacy for my children was that I understand that the medication will help them to focus and to be less disruptive and to be less impulsive, but I'm not going to medicate them to the point to where they're going to be zombies. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to be children, the same grace that you all extend to other children who may have a not so good day. I want that same grace
Right.
extended to my children. And I also advocated for there to be some classroom management, some behavior management in
Mm-hmm.
the classroom so that the school was not entirely dependent on the medication
Mm-hmm.
uh, to remedy all symptoms of ADHD. But it did require that I was open and honest. And I've been from the very beginning honest about
Mm-hmm.
specifically with the school about their diagnosis, about some of the behaviors that I experienced at home. So they were aware, because generally children with ADHD they experience the same behaviors or symptoms in multiple settings.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't a parent that said, "Oh, my child wouldn't do that," because
Like, no,
my child
I've seen
did.
them do that.
I've seen them do that exact thing. So for me to be open and honest with the teachers, it was saying, yes, I have experienced the same thing at home.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I handle it at home. Maybe you can try this. Maybe we can try this, or trying to get on the same page with the teachers. The teachers would try to implement this type of structure at school. And I say, I'm going to do the same thing at home.
Mm-hmm.
So my children also knew that I communicate with the teacher
Right.
pretty regularly. And if a teacher called me when I have a conversation with my children and I say, I'm talking to your teacher,
Mm-hmm.
um, we're working together. They're going to let me know what's going on. So that's how I handle it. And then I've been handling it the same way now. And I even created a journal for one of my 8-year-old's teacher, created a
Mm-hmm.
journal, a teacher's journal, where she's able to document any symptoms. She can document anything that's going on related to how my child is behaving at school, and she has it there. So when I go to parent teacher conferences, she pulls it
That's
out.
good.
This is what's going on. This is what we're working on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's working. And it also helps me to keep the lines of communication open. So she's not having to call me every
Mm-hmm.
2 seconds. She can just jot it down. And then
Right.
when she has
Right.
a moment, she can say, "Hey, this is what I did on this day." But I've been very open, and I can say I'm thankful that my children's school have been just
Mm-hmm.
as open and willing to
Good.
communicate. I know that's not the case for a lot of schools and a lot of parents. And I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of parents have been afraid to share their children's diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
with the school, which for whatever reason. But if I could just encourage them to just be open, because there are accommodations available for the
Yep.
children if you communicate, if you're willing to have that conversation, if you're willing to listen to the teacher's point of view as to what's going on with the child, so you all can get on the same page. It makes a difference, and has made a difference with me and my children,
Mm-hmm.
even through the difficult conversations that
Right.
the teachers have been, well, I hate to call you, and I say it's okay.
Yeah.
I want you to call me. Even when it's something not
Right.
so good that you have to share with me, I want you to let me know.
Yeah.
So I've
I,
always
I, lo-
approached like that.
I love that you said you were not only open with them, but you were saying, I'm working with them. And I think that's so
Mhm.
important. If you have the parent saying, hey, I'm going to contact your teacher. So those kids know they can't, triangulate or
Right.
manipulate in any way. I think that's a huge part of success. It's also really, really good when they know you're in their corner, meaning
Man.
the students
Mhm.
and the
And the
school.
teacher.
Hey,
Mhm.
I'm trying to help you as a teacher as well, and you were very proactive about creating that journal. What does that do? That eliminates her having to call you all the time.
Yep.
but it also gives her some structure of, oh, I need to make sure I'm keeping a track so I can remember
Mhm.
to tell mom all of these things. And I think when teachers know that that parent is on their side, but also on their kid's side,
Right.
it really just helps to bring that gap, and it's encouraging for everybody. So I love that you talked about some of the symptoms that you
Mhm.
were seeing at home, and you were seeing those same things. If someone were saying, I don't know if my child has this, but I'm questioning, what would be some symptoms or signs that maybe be like a guide for them to say, maybe
Okay.
I do need to go ahead and get my child tested?
Okay. So for me, and this was one of the things that made it harder for me. My twins, my 10-year-olds are my first children. So if
Okay.
all of those behaviors were normal
Mm.
to me because I didn't have another guy.
Right.
So the hyperactivity at home, I was like, maybe they're just boys, they're being
Hmm.
boys, they're rambunctious boys. They have a playmate, so they're always on the go. But it was some of those same symptoms at school. They can't sit in their seat when they're expected to. Um, they're in kindergarten, they do a lot of moving, especially in my kids' school, but their hyperactivity superseded what was expected for even a kindergartner. Or they were impulsive, hitting. And it wasn't malicious. I would get calls from school and be like, oh, he hit a student today, but he's not angry. He don't know why he hit him. He just hit him, and for it was, the child didn't do anything to him. He just went and hit him, just very impulsive with his hands, um, running out of the classroom.
Mm.
Um, as they've grown older, extremely forgetful.
Hmm.
It was one of the things that I noticed, like if I would give a task with 3 steps, not being able to remember all 3 steps. That was an indicator of just the memory, being not being able to retain all of the information that I was feeding into them,
Hmm.
and to be able to regurgitate it back. Um, very disorganized, very disorganized. Just not a slow processing speed.
Mm.
They could get it, but it took repetitiveness, having to
Hmm.
ask the teacher multiple times to repeat
Hmm.
instructions or things like that. Um, the symptoms in boys and girls differ. Boys are more
Hmm.
hyperactive. Girls, they say, they're more hyperactive in their minds.
Right.
So they may not be jumping around the classroom, but
Exactly.
their mind is going. They may be daydreaming, or the
Hmm.
teacher may have given an assignment to start, but they're sitting there looking out the window.
Hmm.
Um, so these are some of the symptoms. The three main characteristics or categories of symptoms is hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive. And it shows up in different ways for different children. And with the ADHD diagnosis, some children may be more hyperactive and impulsive, whereas others may be more inattentive. But then you have the children who have a combined type. So they're hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive. So just being able to look at all of those symptoms and noticing that it happens in more than one setting. They're hyperactive at home. I say sit down, they may sit down for 2 minutes and they're back up jumping. The teacher saying the same thing. You're not telling them to sit down. I have to tell them all day to sit down,
Hmm.
or he's not getting his work done. And sometimes children, they try to emulate what the other children are
Right.
doing. Sometimes they can hide it, but some children can't. They can't mask
Hmm.
and stay on task. Just not being able to focus. So if they're having consistent um, low grades,
Hmm.
and you've tried the tutoring and everything, or just not finishing their assignments, there's a reason for that. So that may be reasons to look into an
Right.
evaluation.
Yeah. No, those are really good. Like I said, I have two girls, and one I remember when she was in pre-K, when she would eat, I would pick her up and she would eat, and she would literally take a bite and take off running.
Mhm.
I was like, what in the world? And she's always been super excited, hyper. I mean, just very energetic, very energetic. but I'm energetic. So her daddy's like, so I was just like,
Mhm.
okay, and then I was like, if she's doing this at school, we got problems. And again, I'm a counselor. I
Mhm.
diagnose students with ADHD. So I'm looking and go, well, she's definitely not organized. She's this and she's this.
Uh-huh.
But when I talked to the teacher, she said, no, we're not having any of those
Mhm.
problems. She's able to sit down. And I went, oh, okay. So what I realized was she was doing everything in her might to keep it together at
At
school.
school, and we get home and
And when
just
she got home, she needed that time. And
yep.
so I love when you said, not only am I seeing this here,
Mhm.
when one of the symptoms is when you have ADHD, you're seeing those symptoms a lot of different places, and
Yes.
it's pretty consistent. And so again, like you were talking, there are the different categories that some people may not have hyperactivity. Some
Mhm.
people
Right.
don't get diagnosed early because they don't have the hyperactivity. If
Correct.
you are intelligent and you
Mhm.
don't have the hyperactivity, you may be able to get really good grades, never get in
Absolutely.
trouble. And you're in college. I've had clients to come in and they don't get an ADHD diagnosis literally until they are in college, or even after college, or
Mhm.
after, as adults. And so it's just important to, if you think something's going on, go ahead and get your child tested, talk to the doctor at least, to see what their feedback is. I think would be really helpful. Now, you mentioned you putting your babies on medicine.
Yes.
How did you reach that decision? And what would you say to a parent who may be struggling with, should I medicate? Should I
Mhm.
not? Because there is a lot of concerns about side effects, and rightfully
Absolutely.
so, right? But there are also concerns about the stigma of medication. So
Mhm.
can you speak to kind of your decision,
Yeah.
and how to help guide parents through that decision?
So I think for me, early on, I was a little hesitant, but I think I medicated my children out of fear
Mm,
of them continuing to be suspended. So I wanted them to be able to succeed in school, and I didn't want them to have a label in school as
mhm,
the bad children. So I made my decision then. I didn't have all of the information when my children received their diagnosis. I really didn't get much dialogue from the
mhm.
doctor other than this is, we're going to put them on medication. We'll start it off, check back in a month, let us
Right.
know how they're doing. But as I've learned specifically, even after, as just going through the medications and began to really understand the purpose of the medication and the functionality of the medication, it makes more sense now.
Mhm.
Because the medication, I realized that with ADHD, it's just because they have low levels of dopamine in their brains. The dopamine is the calm and the focus that helps with
Mhm.
the calm and the focus. But for children with ADHD, they don't have that level, that optimal level of dopamine in the brain.
Mhm.
And essentially, that's what the medication is doing. It's keeping the optimal level of dopamine in the brain so they can focus, so they
Mhm.
can be attentive, so they can be less hyperactive, so they can be less impulsive, meaning it's allowing them to think before they act.
Right.
And when I got to that place of understanding, I was a lot more comfortable with allow
Mhm.
them to take medication and really being able to see that it really does work for my children. And it helps them to focus in class because they're extremely smart.
Mhm.
But they've always been smart, but because they couldn't focus or because they were
Right.
being a distraction, they couldn't show that part of who they were. Um, but medicating your children is a personal decision. I would say talk to your doctor,
Mhm.
just talk to a psychologist, talk to someone who is trained with a background in ADHD.
Mhm.
Your pediatrician is a good place, but she or he may not be
Yeah.
as knowledgeable about the ADHD medications or the various options available. Um, some people have had maybe bad side effects and they just stop the medicines completely.
Mhm.
But it's worth being able to take a different route, maybe try different medications, maybe try a different dose. And for anyone on ADHD, everyone is different. So the same medicine that worked for one person may not
Right.
work for the next person. And it does take some trial and error. It took
Mhm.
for I have three different children that are currently on three different doses. They're all on the same medication now, but three different doses now. But it took a lot of trial and error to get to the point of finding something that works, that helps to reduce the symptoms and has
Mhm.
the least amount of side effects. So I would say if there's a parent who's a little leery, just don't give up after one unsuccessful
Mhm.
medication dose that's been given. If you choose to medicate your children, it does help them to focus. It does help them to be able to think. But I always say this: pills don't teach skills. The
Mhm.
medicine works for 4 hours, 10 hours if there's an extended release. But outside of the medication window, your children
Right.
still need structure. They still need to be able to learn skills that would help them be successful in life. So the medication helps, but there is a lot that goes along with the medication for children or anybody with
Mhm.
ADHD.
So I want to get back to that pills don't teach skills, but
Mhm.
I want to go if you have someone who is just adamant against medication,
Mhm.
are there things that they can do that would be helpful even if they did not go the medication route? And I'm not anti-medication. I'm
Mhm.
also not a pill pusher. You
Yes.
know, I try to live in that balanced
Balance.
place
Mhm.
of what's needed in this situation. Because
So,
sometimes, like you said, it's a situation of they just need more dopamine, and bam, we're okay. And then other times it's, oh no, they're lacking some skills here.
mhm,
Let's combine that with some therapy. So I want you to speak to
absolutely.
our other techniques or things that
Sure.
could help if you're not on medication, and even honestly, even if you
If
are
you
on
do.
medication,
Mhm.
what are some skills that parents could begin to teach kids that would help them?
Okay. So, one of the things that I've learned, which is really helpful in my mindset to be able to help my children, is children with ADHD. We all have executive functioning skills.
Hmm.
Everyone. It's not really matured until in anybody until we're about 25.
Hmm.
Children with ADHD are about 2 to 3 years behind in just building and learning the executive function skills. So it requires that parents help children build those skills. And that's one of the things I do as an ADHD parent coach. Teach parents how to teach their children those executive functioning skills to just be successful. It requires a lot of structure. And for children, the children don't know how to implement the structure on their own. So that's where the parent comes into
Right.
to the picture to help create that structure, help teach children how to create structure as they get older, teenagers and college students. Now you can teach them how to understand how they function as
Hmm.
a person with ADHD and be able to create their own structure. But until that point, until they're able to take on those responsibilities, it's the responsibility of the parent to teach the skills and to help provide that structure. Because even with or without medication, we still need to be able to be organized and focused. And those are skills. They just have to be learned. For us, for a typical or neurotypical person, um, working memory is an executive functioning skill. For me, you can give me a task with 7 steps and I can remember them and complete them. But
Hmm.
for a child with ADHD or a person with ADHD, regardless of the age, you can't do that. So the skill would be, okay, I understand that there's a deficit in working memory. So I'm going to write a list.
Hmm.
I'm going to write a list as opposed to expecting
Hmm.
a person with ADHD to remember everything that I've called out for them to do.
Exactly.
So those are some of the skills, building those skills to help a person just function in life with or without medication.
No, I think that's important that parents sometimes don't recognize our expectations are. I look at it sometimes. I go, this person's only been on the earth for 5 years or 6 years. They literally don't know that this is the appropriate way to handle this, or
Right.
and so we have our expectations. Like, you
Mhm.
should know that, and they don't always know those
Right.
things. And so writing list, I found getting Brielle ready for school in the mornings. This was years ago. I started noticing once I created a list for her, just a checklist of things to do. Number one, she woke up motivated because she wanted to put a sticker on her
Right.
chart. but it really helped me not to be so frustrated because
Mhm.
she knew when I wake up, I look at the chart, and after no time, she knew what was on the chart.
Right.
But to just get that chart started with, this is what we do. And so those are some things I think that parents can do. And like you were saying, writing a list for kids who forget after the first try or the first thing on the list that, oh, you told me to do something else.
Mhm.
That list can be important. Teaching them to use things like songs and
Yeah.
like, I always do this, and this, and like, I'll make anything a song. And so teaching a little song, it helps them to remember. And so having someone like you as a coach, I think would be really beneficial for someone to go through and be able to say, oh, I need help with, even knowing, you mentioned executive functioning. I wanted to come back to that because a lot of parents may not know what you mean when you say
Okay.
executive functioning. Can you share more about what that is for students or for kids and adults?
Yeah. For everyone,
Right.
we all learn skills to be successful in life. Whether it's, I'll use this, for an example. Working memory is one of them. Kids learn through
Mm-hmm.
song, through different ways to remember what's required of them. But for children with ADHD, they don't have the same capacity or the working memory
Mm-hmm.
capacity. You can give them 10 tasks, they maybe remember two. So in doing that, that's a skill that has to be taught, meaning, what can I do to help them remember? Which
Mm-hmm.
is, let me put these things into place.
Right.
Or another executive functioning skill is just organization. You may not realize that because some people are just perfect at it, perfect at organizing. But for someone with ADHD who lacks organizational skills, they may have a desire to organize their life, but don't know
Mm-hmm.
where to start.
Yep.
So it may mean creating buckets but
Mm-hmm.
for someone with ADHD, you can't expect them to just start it because we
Right.
know what needs to be done. But for someone with ADHD, they have to have someone, or we call maybe even like a body double, to help them get things done,
Mm-hmm.
help them organize so they can be successful, help them. For an adult, for example, may always be late for work. Not that they have desire to
Right.
always be negligent in getting to work, but the ADHD brain says, for example, I have to be at work at 9. That means I need to get up at this time. That means I need to leave the house at this time because this is all of the thoughts that a person with ADHD has in order for them to get to work at 9. Whereas someone who is neurotypical, they just say I have to be at work at 9 and it happens for them. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do all of the planning, the pre-planning to get there at 9 o'clock, which is something that someone with ADHD has to do. There's a lot of pre-planning or going on in the mind. Or another example for children, the teacher may say, you have homework to do. Do questions 10 to 13. A neurotypical child may get it. Whereas a child with ADHD has to say, okay, I have homework. That means I need to get the paper. That means I need to get the pencil. That means I need to put the paper in my backpack. That means I need to not forget my backpack. That
Mm-hmm.
means, well, these are so many thoughts that someone with ADHD has to grapple with, in compared to someone who doesn't have ADHD. So these are skills that we teach them. And one of the accommodations, um, that they have in school for children who have trouble with being disorganized is they have a buddy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I have for one of my children on his 504 plan is he has a buddy that helps him remember to put his stuff in his backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Because another child may have no problem remembering that he has homework, so that means he needs to bring the homework
Mm-hmm.
home. But for someone with ADHD, they have to have the steps. So he has a buddy that helps him remember to put his stuff in his backpack. So we can get it home and do the homework. So these are just the skills that we expect people to know
Mm-hmm.
that they have it's just delayed. It's delayed for them to mature into learning those skills. um, I always laugh at this because one of my children he comes in the house and leaves the door wide open every day. So it's a reminder, close the door. Reminder, close the door. For me, it's common sense to close when you come in the house. But these are just some of the small things
Mhm.
that once I started to learn, I was like, there's no use to me getting frustrated because he didn't close the door. Because eventually, so the days that he does close the door, I'm like, yeah, he closed the door on his own. But those are just some of the examples of some of the skills that we expect children to
Mhm.
have, but they really just need to be taught the skills, which
Yeah.
to us are no brainers. But it's taking the time, taking the
Yeah.
step back to say, my expectation is that they know this skill, but
Mhm.
that may not be their expectation. And as a parent coach, I help parents to take the step back and say, okay, have you taught them this skill?
Mhm.
Do you know that they can actually complete that skill before your expectation is that they
Right.
actually do it? You need to know, you need to teach them, communicate the skill to them, communicate the expectation to them, make sure they know how to do it. Then you can start expecting
Right.
them to do it. So the coaching part of that is I'm teaching parents how to break it down.
That's so good. I'm glad you're out there because it's needed. It's so needed. One of the things I try to teach in our home is trying as much as possible to get us on a routine.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, my daughter has glasses and she lost them, broke them, lost them again. It was all kinds of stuff
Mm-hmm.
with glasses. So the first thing I did this year was get two pair of glasses. Okay, so let's
Mm-hmm.
just start there. But the other thing is, I said I have to teach her every time you take them off, this is where you put them. And
Right.
so even if she would take them off and put them somewhere else, I would say, doesn't matter what she's doing. Hey, your glasses are on the table. And where do they go? Oh, in my case, in my bag. Okay, go do that now. And so
Mm-hmm.
she started getting much more accustomed to glasses here. They
Right.
go here. When I take them off, they go here. And we haven't had any issues with her losing her glasses. She still has both pair. I'm really thankful. But again, it's some of those small things that sometimes we as parents will get really frustrated. Like,
Yeah.
why can't you keep up with your glasses? And
Mm-hmm.
why, as opposed to saying, I'm going to have to like teach this child how to
Absolutely.
remember through routine or through repetition to do those things. And
Absolutely.
now she's like, mommy, my glasses here. And and she's asking me and making sure she's keeping up with it. But it
Mm-hmm.
does take us, and that's with the ADHD brain and a non-ADHD
Right.
brain. We just have to go through that repetitiveness. So I love that. Now I want to go back. You mentioned about the 504 plan.
Yes.
And I had some guests last season, and we talked about parenting children with the diagnosis of autism.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about advocating and going through their
Absolutely.
ADHD, their 504 plan or their IEP plan and all of that stuff. What are some common um, accommodations that can be given to children that parents may not know is available,
Mm-hmm.
like the buddy thing? I didn't know that was a thing. I've heard of a lot of them, but I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's one I don't remember when I was working in the schools.
Uh-huh.
Can you share some of those accommodations, and how do parents learn about what's available for them?
Absolutely. So there are several accommodations, and now they have a new fancy system in Arkansas. Um, so it may be the same across the country. So always talk to your school district, specifically with the 504. And I think that a lot of people get caught up here as it relates to ADHD. To request a 504 plan, it's you have to go through the special education
Mhm.
department. People get caught up on, oh, it's special ed. This is just a department that
Yep.
handles those requests. If your child has been diagnosed with ADHD, they're available. They have access to accommodations, but it has to be in writing. You have to
Mhm.
write a letter. It needs to be in writing, requesting those accommodations. And if you have specific symptoms that your children has, for example, extremely disorganized, I want to see what accommodations are available. All of this needs to be in
Mhm.
writing, addressed to your special education department, or talk to your district about who handles those requests.
Mhm.
But some of the requests may be extra time on tests because, of course, children
Mhm.
with ADHD have poor time management. they don't understand the concept of time like someone else. So they may be working and not aware of the time. You may request that there be a timer in the corner, that your child a digital clock
Mm-hmm.
in the room. Or children with ADHD are really impulsive or fidgety. They need something in their hands. So they have access to fidgets, hand fidgets,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes chair fidgets, preferential seating, maybe seating in the front of the classroom so all of the distractions
Mm-hmm.
are behind them. Or they may have the wobbly seats, something like that, because children with ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
their brain is going. So if their body is going, they're actually focusing better as opposed to sitting still. They may need breaks between assignments. They may need a stretch break, or they may need to stand. I think one of my children stands in the back of the class at some point of the day.
Mm-hmm.
He's learning. A buddy system to help them get organized. And these are all things that are able to, they're able to accommodate in the classroom. Because, of course, the goal is to keep them in the general education as much as possible setting. So that means in the classroom, they have access to this, or they may have access to, if they're easily distracted, maybe they need to take their test in a quiet area. So when
Mm-hmm.
everyone else is taking a test, that they may be able to be pulled to a different area, or to have their assignments read to them. I think they do that quite a bit for a lot of the students.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a reading assignment, for example, the accommodation could be that they use headphones and it's text to speech.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's just the wide array of accommodations, and it has to be specific to your child's needs. So it's not a one size fits all. And if you're in those 504 meetings and they say, oh well, they can do this and they can do that, which may be the base level,
Mm-hmm.
but advocate for your child, because you want the accommodation to make it equal and fair for them to learn. It's
Yeah.
not a privilege. It's allowing them to have an equal and fair opportunity to learn like everyone else. That's why it's called an accommodation.
Right.
So just advocate for, if you know your child has a specific struggle, ask for
Mm-hmm.
accommodations for that specific struggle, as opposed to any type of generic, oh, they can get extra time. But do they really need extra time, or do they need something more specific?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of accommodations. The best thing you can do as a parent is to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And each district should have access to what the accommodations list. There's a list. You
Mm-hmm.
may be able to cater the list specific to your child, or select from a huge drop down list of accommodations. So just don't be afraid to
Yeah.
ask.
Okay. Now we talked a little before we actually started the interview, and one of the things we know happens is children with ADHD often get additional tags, okay, to say
Mhm.
the least, right? So
Mhm.
it's, yeah, they got ADHD, but they're also defiant and they have ODD, or oppositional defiance disorder,
Mhm.
but they also have this and this and this. Can you speak to kind of some of the comorbidity that you see, either with your children or just as
Mhm.
your role as a coach?
Sure. So ADHD is not generally, unfortunately, is not a standalone
Right.
diagnosis. There's probably upwards of 50 to 60% of children with ADHD who have some other type of comorbidity. Um, I do want to say, though, that ADHD is not synonymous with unintelligent. They're
Say
actually
it
they're
again.
actually very intelligent, very creative thinkers. So there's nothing to be ashamed of with the ADHD
Right.
diagnosis. They just think differently. But some of the comorbidities that we do see is oppositional defiant disorder, which is, that's when you get to defiance, or the rudeness, or they say disobedience. But generally with children with ODD, if they're treated with medication for ADHD, you'll see that the ODD kind of dissipates as well.
Mhm.
But children with ADHD also suffer from depression and from anxiety, especially if it's untreated. Especially if
Mhm.
your ADHD is untreated, you will see some anxiety, because now they're anxious because they're getting the labels of bad, and
Mhm.
they know that they're the low self-esteem, and they know that they're not performing on the same level of their peers, or they probably aren't socially accepted. So,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to some depression. Because with the impulsivity, it's probably hard for them to make friends because they're doing things to other children, which makes children not want to be friends with them. So now we're looking at some depression, and there are some children with ADHD who do have learning
Mm-hmm.
disorders. They may have dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. Those are some of the learning disorders. They may have other mood disorders. So that's why it's really good to have a full evaluation
Mm-hmm.
to because some of the ADHD symptoms also mimic anxiety and
Yeah.
depression. So you want to rule out anxiety and depression before you come to a
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis of ADHD. But again, it could be comorbid where they actually have ADHD and anxiety, or ADHD and
Mm-hmm.
depression, or learning disorders. Um, and Tourette syndrome, maybe another. And generally, people may say, "Oh, once I started my children on ADHD medication, they acquired Tourette's." No, the Tourette's was there.
Mm-hmm.
The stimulant medication just probably made the symptoms of Tourette's more prevalent. So those are just things that you need to be aware
Mm-hmm.
of, and just talk to your provider about how to best manage. And sometimes it's a matter of determining which condition you're actually going to treat first, which is going to
Mm-hmm.
be your first level
Right.
of treatment, and to essentially help the child be their best self.
Yeah. Which is why I'm glad we talked about that part, because so many times you do see that impact on the confidence or the
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or depression as a result of all the things you just mentioned. And that's why I think getting the diagnosis early, you
Mm-hmm.
begin to say, "Hey, baby, there's nothing wrong with you."
Right.
But you also, your friends may not like it when you touch their hair like that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's some things that you could do, and teaching them different things, which
Absolutely.
then helps them socially, helps them, emotionally, decrease some of the anxiety and all of that stuff. So I just think advocating for your kids, going out there, learning so we can get the diagnosis or the
Absolutely.
right understanding early so we can
Mm-hmm.
start. I'm really thankful that you were like kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and get these babies to a psychologist, psychiatrist, and
Yeah.
get someone to test them, or a psychologist, so they can be tested, and we can see what's going on, and I can have a accurate picture of what I'm dealing with moving forward. And it
Absolutely.
sounds like as a result of that, your children have really been able to thrive.
Oh,
I
yes.
have another question for you, and then we'll wrap up. Maybe. What is a mindset that you as a mom had to overcome
Mm-hmm.
to get to this place of, again, not blaming yourself, being able to help your kids? What mindset shifts did you have to deal with?
Um, Specifically, I had to say it wasn't me. I'm not a
Mhm.
bad parent, for one. And I had to drown out the noise from our community because of how we view mental health conditions. I had to
What's the noise? I don't know what you're
drown
talking about. I can't imagine any noise. What noise did you hear, or what type of noise did you hear?
just specifically, oh, they just, oh, they just bad. They just need a good whooping. As if whooping them was gonna make everything, better.
Hmm.
Or that, ooh, that ADHD, that's a crazy condition, or if you're on that crazy medicine. um Drowning out that noise, and
Hmm.
drowning out that I could parent my child differently than I was parented, and be okay with
Hmm.
that.
Did you
There's
get
nothing wrong
pushback
with
from
me.
your family, your
I did.
parents?
I did. Not necessarily. So the pushback was more so how I chose to parent, meaning that if I take a step back and evaluate how I discipline a different way, then
Mm.
there was a little pushback. We've had some uncomfortable family settings, um, where maybe, I didn't want my children getting hounded on because they couldn't sit down. Um, or they were expected to sit down and not run and things like that. Just the way that, I wanted
Mhm.
people to talk to my children, because they have feelings.
Mhm.
Um, wanted them to be able to acknowledge that, they are doing something wrong, but the way in which you acknowledge it can determine if they are successful in changing behaviors or not.
Right.
And that's just something as a parent, that's one of the things I teach with parent coaching. The way in which I approach the situation can make or break or break my children. And I don't want to be the one to break my children. And I want to protect them as best I can
Right.
from others who choose not to acknowledge that there is a different way to handle situations.
Now, okay, I promise this is the last two
Okay,
questions.
no, I'm good.
One question you spoke to, and I thought, oh, that's so good. Like being able to step away and say, I'm going to do things differently. You were able to say, I need my children to still know there are socially acceptable behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're having a hard time sitting still, there's still an expectation in
Mm-hmm.
class that you're able to do this. And then you have the parent who may be enabling behavior because they say, oh, they've got ADHD, they can't help it. Can you speak to how to find the balance between enabling and, criminalizing everything at the same time?
Right. So there has to be a balance, because one of the things that I've learned as an ADHD parent coach is I can't make them responsible if they're not response able. So if they're not able to respond, then I can't make them responsible for the learning or the expectation. That's why it's important to teach your children, have those conversations about what the expectation is, and then hold them and provide discipline, sometimes natural consequences to them failing to meet those expectations. But I can't hold them to a standard that I've never taught them.
That's
And
good.
some of those standards that we expect because they're just children, they should know. I can't expect that of them if I haven't communicated. They deserve communication. They deserve to know directly from me what my expectation is. I expect you to be able to sit down. If I know that they are overstimulated and overwhelmed, then I know how to withdraw them from the situation, whether it's take them outside, let them run off for 15 minutes, even in 30-degree weather. But I know that they have a lot of energy to burn. So I can't expect them to sit down if I know that they are need an avenue to be able to burn off some of the energy. Let them go play for 30 minutes. Then they'll probably be able to sit down, or being able to identify the triggers and being able to respond accordingly. And that's about knowing the child, knowing the things that trigger them, knowing the things that overwhelm them. And it's about taking time to learn your child. Learn what makes them tick so you can help not only them be better, but others around them, so you can inform, hey, if you notice this, and this is what I had to do a lot with like aftercare programs, because by the time they get to aftercare, the medication is worn off. Hey, if you notice this, stop it now. If you don't stop it now, they're going to be so dysregulated that you're not going to be able to bring them back. And it took some of my children having some really bad blow-ups because I didn't see the warning signs, or I didn't see the triggers of them being dysregulated. But now I'm learning them. I know when they're on that verge. So I've been able to teach the aftercare, hey, let him sit by himself. He'll be fine. He's okay. He don't feel isolated, but he needs this time to cool down. And just the way in which he cools down just sometimes has to be different. And like punishing a child with ADHD and not letting them play is counterproductive. So finding ways to punish them or discipline them that is helpful.
So the last question is, how do people contact you? What is, how can they reach you to get your services, to follow you, to learn more?
Okay, so you can find me on Facebook, Angel A. Gates. That's my profile page there. And you can find me at ourjourneythrough.adhd.com. Find me on there, ourjourneythrough.adhd.com. You'll see all of my services. I have a few digital products books and journals, things that you can purchase and download. You have instant download, and there I'll be updating services and be offering group
Oh,
classes for the parent coaching and some one-to-one. So find me on our journey through ADHD.com for all of your ADHD parenting needs.
well, thank you so much, everybody. Give it up for our guest, Dr. Gates. Again, thank you for joining us. Again, give hearts, give fire, share this, even though we're at the end. Go ahead and share it to somebody you forgot about. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys, make sure you join us right back here next Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we will be again talking about more mental health issues and tearing down that stigma in our community. Thank you, Dr. Gates. Is there any parting words before we end?
Just thank you so much for having me to be able to share about ADHD and reducing the stigma, specifically in our community. I'm so appreciative of you having me on, and I am here doing the work to help families have raised successful children.
Thank you again. You guys, I will see you next week and I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.
Thank you.